Harry Sudock, welcome into the Blue Collar Bitcoin podcast. Yes, I did just pronounce your name correctly, which is a big deal, I think, in Bitcoin. Like I was thinking through before we click record, cold storing your Bitcoin, running a Bitcoin node, and then properly pronouncing S-U-D-O-C-K. Those are like the 3 litmus tests of a hardcore Bitcoiner. So I'm very proud of that. We're pumped to chat. Just absolutely hang out. I got so much I want to cover with you. You're one of those people that I want to ask you about literally everything. So we'll contain ourselves. We know you're a busy dude, but welcome in.
Just before we click record, Harry was showing us he's in New York City, and there's like a dense fog from these Canadian wildfires. We coincidentally had a wildfire at our fire department the other day. I was the engineer. Some kids just started a brush fire because, everything, so where we're at, everything is dry as hell. Obviously, it isn't everywhere around here, right? They started a little fire, turned into a bigger thing, and Dan, you'll commiserate with this. No fire hydrant within like 500 feet. So we pull up like, oh, dude, tank water's going to take care of this, no problem. Well, Charlie blasted out the tank water in like 2 minutes. Then we had to pull a skid, go 500 feet to this hydrant. It was a
sprain your ankle and go home, Harry. That's what you do. When you're a firefighter and you show up and there's not a fire hydrant within 500 feet, just fake an injury, go home.
You got to. You got
to. Seriously, though, we got to talk about it for a second because you just showed us out your window. It seriously looks like, from our vantage point, a dense fog in New York.
It's like a horror movie.
It's crazy.
It's wild. It's like, it feels like, I feel my eyes. I feel the irritation a little bit. I feel it in my breathing a little bit. But New York City is not notoriously a downwind wildfire zone. But thanks to our Canadian brothers and sisters, they gave us a big northern gift. Apparently,
get that under control.
Took a giant shit in New York City. That's the gift they gave you.
Exactly. Exactly. Can't leave soon enough.
We want to grab some kind of, unforeseen topics here. And I wanted to ask you about a book that you had talked about with, last time you were on McCormick's podcast, you mentioned you downloaded Hail Mary. It's a Andy Weir book, the guy who wrote The Martian. Great book. I read it. It's one of my favorite sci-fi books at the moment. I'm really curious. Are you still reading it?
40% in.
Dude, what do you think? What do you think? So I'm not going to ruin anything for you, but what are your thoughts, high level, on that book?
I'm loving it so far. I'm a sucker for like a time jump and multiple kind of eras. I thought Three Body Problem did a great job covering obviously a huge span of time. If you're watching YellowJackets on Showtime, that one's covering a pretty solid time jump storyline. So I really like the high action present day crisis situation that they're going through, followed by the like, how the fuck did we get here? And so you're able to see kind of in retrospect, like the decision making process that's going on. And sort of like, how did the powers that be, and I don't want to spoil it for all your guests, but tell me if you've heard this sci-fi trope before. Humanity is in crisis.
Right.
We need to develop novel technology very rapidly to fight against it. Now we need to deploy the novel technology, to solve the crisis, and we don't know if it's going to work. So,
oh shit, I don't know. Is it going to go? Is it not going to go? Who knows?
You just spoiled it for me, dude. I'm not going to read it. He just gave away the whole plot.
Joseph Campbell wrote that book, 100 years ago. It's already been done, but it is a really good execution of a good sci-fi book. And what I love about Weir's books is that he grounds it in reality, like in physics, like everything. I mean, a lot of that book gets way out there, but most of it is grounded in some like fairly solid science. Like I think he has a lot of scientists that he confers with in order to make up these stories, which is cool. It's not just off the wall to be off the wall. It's fairly realistic.
Totally. So there's a really good trope in fantasy science fiction and also just like narrative building, right? There's sort of two categories. The first is you change one thing in the otherwise real world. The other is you change everything. So to do, the counter, the counter positioning, one is, the change one thing is, like three body problem. I mentioned it. Like everything on Earth is what it is. aliens from 400 light years away are coming, right? They change one thing and then everything else is grounded in, the relatively physical world that we live in today. Totally other end of the spectrum would be something like Lord of the Rings, right? Everything's different. Yeah. There's different races. We're in a different planet. Where, there's completely different variables that you're engaging with. And I think, when you go into dissecting a story like that, consuming a story like that, knowing kind of which camp you stand in from the outset makes it, number one, I have more fun, right? I'm not expecting one and getting the other. But the other piece is it then becomes like much more actionable for me. To think about, what are the new ideas and what are the new kind of character relationships I'm getting to be a part of. And then you transpose that onto like a real life biography, right? So if you had to sort of stack rank my genre consumption, it would be like sci-fi, biographies, and nonfiction. I don't know, like learn something new, right? Like what would you consider like Eric Voskuil's book, right? Like that's just pure technical, theory, or like a Rene Girard philosophy book. Like that's like the third category. But I think that when you think about sort of the greats of history and, why can you learn so much from them, right? You get to consume all the lessons that somebody learned in whatever, 15, 20 hours of reading. Like I think about the John Rockefeller book where he really lives in the everything has to be different category because he was living in the midst of a technology disruption, right? He's sitting at the intersection of rail and hydrocarbons, right? Both of those technologies didn't really exist at scale in scaled networked ways.
Right.
When he started, they were both the dominant technologies, both from a transportation, energy, and downstream manufacturing perspective by the end of his life. And so he is a person whose biography comes out of the everything is different category. Whereas I think of like who would be a good example of the opposite might be the Walton family, right? Like if you look at the Walmart biography, that's just one thing changing within the context of everything else. So like Jeff Bezos has a great quote, which is, he doesn't want to tell you all the things that are going to be different next year or in 5 years or in 10 years. He wants to tell you the things that are going to be the same and to build a business around the things that are going to actually be persistent over a multi-decade timeline. No one wants to pay more. No one wants it slower. No one wants lower quality, so these are ideas like, the reason that Amazon double and tripled down on a logistics business is because he was going to make the bet that nobody wanted a slower package.
Yeah.
Whereas,
man,
John Rockefeller went the opposite way. He said, actually, nobody's going to want to heat their houses with whale oil, right? Kerosene is going to be a fossil fuel byproduct, and we're going to deliver it cheaply and to hundreds of order of magnitudes more households. Right? Everything will be different. Steve Jobs, everything will be different. Everyone will have a laptop. It's not just going to be a mainframe that sits at corporate HQ. It's going to be something that's in your living room. And so the world is broken into these persistent ideas that go through some sort of incrementalism and foundational changes that end up actually being platform shifts that interact with our lives, in scaled ways that we didn't anticipate.
I mean, there's a huge noticeable thread to pull on there with Bitcoin. And that being, when you look at
be different, right?
Assets and existing financial infrastructure in the 21st century, what is going to stand the test of time over decades, not years? And that's where, as it often does, Bitcoin is not as it first appears. It looks like this flash in the pan, basement dwelling, mouth breathing losers trading this in their basement, when in fact it's got staying power over lifetimes, probably multi-generational. The other thing I gathered from what you say, which shocks me, Harry, is that you don't just take in Bitcoin content. It sounds like
Dude, the bear market was made for other content, man. It's when you read books. That's when the sci-fi books hit hardest, is in the bear market.
This is part of, we were talking about podcast fatigue. And it's funny, we'll say as podcasters, any podcaster gets fatigued with their own content, but also just with Bitcoin content in general. And here's the sort of the interesting thing about where I'm at, and then I'm interested to hear where you two are at. I'm actually as excited about Bitcoin. If I was to make a scale, 10's the most excited about Bitcoin I've ever been. 1's the low bound. I'm going to put myself, gentlemen, in like the 8 category right now. I'm really excited about Bitcoin right now.
Wait a second. Are you talking like 8 out of 10 scale when we ask old ladies like, hey, how bad is that
how
chest
much
pain
pain
hurt?
are
And
you
they're
in?
like,
Oh,
10. It's a 10. Oh my God.
No, this is
like,
a real.
This is a 4, clearly.
This is a hard 8, folks. This is a hard 8 enthusiasm. Having said that, I like to read and take in, as you two guys do, way more than just Bitcoin from a podcasting, reading, article, topics in general. And when you're creating a Bitcoin content, there is something naturally constraining about you're pretty focused on one topic. And hearing you guys talk about sci-fi, I think one of the things that I'm missing the most that I wish and I need to carve out time for is just reading more. Like, I've always read a lot, and now that we're kind of creating content, that cadence has gone down because there's always something to prep for next week. I'm reading fewer books per year, which I view as a problem and something I need to reorient and prioritize because, as you said, Harry, there is no substitute for taking in something that someone has taken years to distill down.
For sure.
I love long form articles. I love Twitter threads. I love podcasts. They are not the same as books.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Before we move off this topic of books, though, the 3-body problem, I actually just ordered that this morning. Going on a trip tomorrow, I needed a book. Ordered those 3 books because you recommended those when you were talking to Peter McCormick, and so I'm excited for that.
Dude,
I want to just translate us.
Promise to have me back. I promise to have me back, and we'll do a 1 hour, 2 hour on just that book.
It's that good?
Is it
really that good? Dude, I'm so pumped for this. I think the last sci-fi book I was so enthralled in, like the way that you seem to be with this, was Hyperion. That I don't know if you've read any of that series.
I haven't yet.
Phenomenal.
It's
very different spin on sci-fi, though.
Yeah,
very different. So I was going to take us really quick before we get off the pseudo alien topic here. Have you kept up with this latest alien controversy? Have you?
That apparently we
this
have
guy
ships in custody and have been doing experiments.
This is like Bob Lazar stuff.
We have
a 36-year-old dude named
custody. Yeah, the U.S. government.
This guy was a decorated combat veteran, Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which I've never even heard of. And National Reconnaissance Office. I know. And this guy says we've got spaceships and aliens.
Have you guys had Matt? Man, forgive me if you haven't. I haven't listened to it yet, but you've had Matt Pines on.
Yeah, and he's actually our next guest, Harry. So it's gonna get deep on aliens. Yeah, he's on next Tuesday.
I am your run of the mill Twitter conspiracy theorist on the alien topic. I do. All right,
so you're right in our wheelhouse now.
Yeah, I see the tweets, we see the controversy, we see the threads, and it tickles my fancy like the next guy. But Matt is all the way in it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So he's gonna. I was on
the analyst desk with him in Miami, so I was sidebarring with him, and he wanted to make it very clear to me. Like the main message he wanted me to leave with, I could tell because it was the first time we met in person, was, Dan, I'm dead serious about this alien shit.
Yeah.
And so,
dude, I'm so excited to talk to him about that, dude. It's going to kill.
Like we were talking about.
We might have to just talk about aliens exclusively through that entire podcast.
That's his preference.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
So all
right, what should we get into here, Josh? Give us I don't know where to start with Harry.
There's a lot, man. I guess give us your high level. What are you excited about in Bitcoin right now? What did you see at the conference that was maybe way off your radar that you think is going to be a big deal that people may not be paying attention to?
Good question. I think, right now feels a lot like the post-COVID crash in March of 2020, where we were just like slogging through the trough again. And so I think like it's a great moment for people who have staying power to like go, you make all your gains in your 11th rep, 12th rep, right? So this is that, right? This is the part where everybody makes all their gains, is the next, 30, 60, 90 days. and maybe much longer than that, who knows? But it feels like we're at the point where it's the like, you just keep going. Now is the time where we just keep going. I think that I'm hesitant to say it this way, but I almost think we're like out of bad news, right?
I mean, what else do we have? We had Coinbase getting sued, Binance getting sued, like the whole thing's just shitting
stripped
the bed.
down, flogged, covered in tar and feathered. Yeah, what else can they do to us?
The episode of South Park where they talk about people dying and they shit their pants, like this whole thing just died and it's shitting its pants right now, and that's exactly where we are in the scheme of things.
Yeah, and so like I feel pretty differently. Like when Celsius and FTX and the laundry list of fractional reserve crypto banking blew up, the market just like was just relentlessly puking in Bitcoin and outside of it. But what's interesting about this is that we're not seeing that, right? We're seeing everybody who was going to sell because of bad news has done so. And really everybody that's left are sort of the value builders. We're seeing interesting businesses. I actually think there's a number of really interesting technical businesses that are coming out right now. Whether it's across the Lightning space, I'm paying close attention to the Mutiny wallet that's just coming out. You should get one of those guys on to talk about what they're working on. I am the wrong guy for it. But they're doing a really good job kind of, I think it's a bit of a trope, but like the UX hurdle remains relatively high. And so continuing to make sort of technical progress and user experience progress without some of the compromises that a lot of companies have made in the past. So continuing to kind of trust minimize and security minimize and anonymity, preference the software that's getting built without a huge UX compromise. So I sat through a really, really good Sparrow Wallet demo from Craig Raw, who is the lead developer on that project, founder and lead developer.
We love Sparrow, dude. We are Sparrow disciples.
The best. Yeah. Sparrow maximalist.
We should.
Craig is
We've
awesome.
been talking about that actually. Yeah.
He came.
Writing it down.
Bet we didn't get to meet him down there.
He came to Bitcoin Park as well and did a small demo and workshop with us. So it was pretty sick to have him in Nashville. I'm super bullish on what the mempool guys are doing. I think that their transaction accelerator is a really, really interesting step for them to take. I think we're going to see sort of the Lightning usability unlock happen in a more major way. I'm already seeing it. We just saw the Google Cloud announcement that came out of Voltage. And that backend hosting capability is really exciting. I definitely get the like, what, you want your Lightning infrastructure hosted by Google? Like that pushback is fair, but we need to see a broad range of implementations.
There's also limitations to what a Raspberry Pi can do. That I forget who was talking about it on one of the panels, but he's basically like, some of the limitations here are basically, CPU wise, as far as like, if I'm running, this Raspberry Pi, Dan's running one, and everyone on the Lightning Network there's limitations to what this thing can do just based on the hardware running it. So we are going to realistically need infrastructure that hopefully we can maintain both parts of this decentralized Raspberry Pi system that everyone's running. And as these things upgrade, they'll get better anyway. But the point is Google infrastructure is going to be robust, and it'll at least give it some extra gravitas on the back end.
Exactly. And there's a throughput component to Lightning infrastructure that is going to come with a number of different trade-offs, whether it's using, a Fediment implementation, and the guys at Fedi are obviously leading that right now. Whether it's, some of these hosted channels, or custodial, partially custodial, semi-custodial, Lightning nodes, like these are things that's going to evolve into a tapestry of security trade-offs that are going to basically map to individual preferences at the transaction type level. And so when I go and, when I go and do whatever kind of commerce that I'm doing, on a day-to-day basis, a custodial Lightning channel may be plenty. And topping that thing up weekly or monthly is going to look a lot like settling a credit card bill in my current kind of payment work stream. Buying houses, saving wealth, building my grandchildren's assets, like that's a different thing. And I'm going to be able to take on the security model that maps to each of those use cases. And so, when I get the pushback, but isn't that hard? Like, yeah, so is every single person in America being asked to be their own financial advisor as they put their money into stocks and risk assets in order to maintain purchasing power. Like, we are a sophisticated people, and we're going to be able to rise to the occasion for the tools that are available to us. So, I'm really, really excited to see that topology start to emerge a little bit. I'm super bullish on Bitcoin third spaces. It's definitely a shill, but I joined the Bitcoin Park guys as a third and passive partner in their situation. We're moving down to Nashville and getting out of apparently this wildfire hellscape.
Good for you.
Thank you. So that's gonna be fun. And the guys at PubKey are doing it. The folks down at Bitcoin Commons are doing it. Like this need for fellowship amongst the Bitcoin community. I've been, cautiously paying some attention to the kind of, I don't know, the anti-Bitcoin culture war that we seem to find ourselves in. And I just think that like it's reductive and stupid. And really what Bitcoiners have accurately identified is a need for fellowship, right? We don't want to live life alone. We want to have a sense of purpose and a sense of community. And has that manifested in a little bit more white blood cell behavior than is warranted all the time? Totally. But I think that,
well said, dude. Yeah.
But I think that like we've accurately identified the needs, the human needs, and we're seeking it out the best ways we know how. And so when you identify a need accurately, the job is to bring a higher quality experience to that. And so that's what we're working on at the park. We're doing it with, Lightning Summit and Mining Summit and a number of these different sort of 2-day intensives. We've got an open meetup. We do Nashville Bit Devs every month. Like we're just going to put together the program that we wish existed, 5-6 years ago. We were talking beforehand, 2016, 17 kind of time frame. Like, there were just a bunch of weirdos who would hang out with me in New York City and we talk about Bitcoin. And that's the environment that Odell came out of and Marty came out of and Pierre Rochard came out of. Like that was sort of the Bit Devs community there. And we've kind of been scattered to the wind. But I think it's that full circle moment where it's time to start to reprioritize, doing Bitcoin in person together.
Yeah. I like your white blood cell comment in that where there's no easy answer is the line between culture and cult. And this is kind of being bounced around right now. Nick Carter put out this big thread this morning. Not saying I agree with it all, and I'm going to get a lot of haters here. I actually think it was really well written, and I actually resonated with quite a bit of it because I do think that there is we say this all the time on here, but a lot of really black and white binary thinking. A lot of, I like to call them 3-book Bitcoiners, people that have read like 3 Bitcoin books, and now their entire life and identity is wrapped in a protocol that they don't even know the first thing about how it's actually designed. That's one side. But to what you're saying, there is a vibrant, necessary, important, life-giving culture emerging here that we are tapping into ourselves. And we're down in Miami, you're around a bunch of kindred spirits, incredibly intelligent, thoughtful, kind, loving people. And that's because this protocol is more than just zeros and ones. This thing hits on a lot of deep freedom veins, incentives that we are craving for desperately in the 21st century. And so, like you said, you're going to have some people go overboard. You're going to have some shallow, quasi-religious thinking that you're probably going to have to put up with, because this is not just a momentous protocol and innovation, but also a really cool budding community that is 100% worth tapping into. If you're listening, go to some meetups, go to a conference, get around other Bitcoiners, because they are some special people. Some weirdos too, though. We'll say that.
Oh yeah,
Totally.
I mean, every community's full of them too. But
yeah,
we saw a few, a few of those. while we're talking about the cult-like mentality that we're all kind of just sifting through and enjoying the hell out of, the ordinals debate was something that was supremely entertaining. I thought after listening back to it, Dan and I agreed that like there was a lot of substance delivered there, maybe with a lot of hubris and a lot of, they didn't really bring it across in the way that people would receive it necessarily. People got all bent out of shape because they're making fun of Bitcoin culture and all that. But what I want to ask about is the miner extracted value portion of it. That's not something I know much about. I was hoping that maybe you could elucidate a little bit more about what exactly does that mean in the context of Bitcoin and ordinals? Like, how do miners have to wrap their heads around this? And how important is it for miners to take this into consideration for the near future with ordinals being involved in Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's a great topic. I think it's important to give us a little bit of the historical kind of emergence of what miner extracted value MEV is.
Absolutely. We're here to listen. This is Sunday school. We're at the front of the church. The pastor's speaking to us.
It's not a cult.
There's a giant picture of Noah's Ark with some giraffes and elephants and
all
shit
literal.
climbing up.
Every bit of it is literal.
So basically, this is an Ethereum thing, at least in origin, where because there is all of this highly descriptive programming language native to that software protocol, you can do a lot of stuff by settling transactions on Ethereum. And so, what was that in call it 1718? It's ICOs, right? ICO is launching at X amount of time. Everybody wants to pile in to buying into that ICO. And so it creates an enormous amount of fee pressure to get to the front of the line. The difference between Ethereum and Bitcoin, and it's a design choice that Bitcoin is, in my opinion, vastly superior, is just block time. So Ethereum has very fast blocks. So the chain tip is getting reorged in Ethereum almost by design. And so the ability to pile an MEV block ahead of a previous block is something that happens in that environment frequently and to great financial gain to those who are paying to do it. So if you've heard terms like a sandwich attack or some others, there's an article by one of the guys who works at Paradigm called Ethereum is a Dark Forest that captures a lot of this conceptually. And then the Bitcoiner who wrote sort of the big kind of critique piece is Alex B on Twitter. Do you know him? Alex Bergolo?
Yeah, we do.
Yep. Okay, cool. So I love his stuff. He and I see eye to eye often. And his stuff is really a good critique of it. But it's important to understand that the more non-native asset economic activity begins to accumulate in the transaction set of a current block, the more distorted the incentive structure around miner bidding on those transactions becomes. So how does that work, right? So the way that worked in proof of work ETH was you go to an Ethereum pool, you tell them, I pay you lots of money, put my block ahead, do the reorg. And that was a standard, MEV bot, methodological choice that chain basically optimized for inadvertently or on purpose. Now, we will likely not see that come to Bitcoin in the same way at all, likely, because of a couple of factors. One of them being that, Bitcoin is that the amount of hash rate on Bitcoin is massive. And the block times for Bitcoin are significantly longer. So though there's sort of these natural friction coefficients attached to the way that new transactions are included in the Bitcoin blockchain, over time. So I think that, what's interesting is that we're now seeing non-native assets or non-native, non-native exchange rate, right? someone wants to bid on an inscribed sat, that's on them,
Right.
but that's not a function of the USD trading pair or the other currency trading pair against Bitcoin in that block. And then you extend that to the BRC20 decisions, in addition to that, and a whole other set of incentives start to emerge as well. I think it's really, really interesting. I think that, the piece that I think a lot about is that, block space is a commodity good within the context of the Bitcoin ecosystem, the same way that the UTXO set is a commodity good. And there's, like with any monetization event, the monetary premium that's accruing to Bitcoin is not really accruing to this other use case. So there's no sort of monetary premium distortion happening. It's purely a utility function for what that block space is being used for the individual using it. So, I think that's what I like a lot about it relative to sort of the ETH use case, at least from what we've seen, is that, ETH is just trying to mint a bunch of I guess, what we found are securities this week on top of it. And so it's purely this sort of this speculative race. And in Bitcoin, there's a component of that for sure, but the monetary premium is accruing to the endogenous asset, and the utility use case is accruing to sort of this complementary good.
Howdy, plebs. It is Dan here. I want to take a minute to talk to you about Crowd Health. What Crowd Health is doing in the healthcare space is nothing short of remarkable. If you're already familiar with Crowd Health, you can visit joincrowdhealth.com/BCB and use code BLUE for a tantalizing 3-month trial discount. As you probably know by now, the two of us are career firefighter paramedics. Nearly 70% of our calls are medical related, and we both rotate over to an ambulance. We're the first link in the chain in the healthcare system, and we see just how broken it is. Injured and sick patients stressed out of their mind, primarily worried about the incoming hospital bill. Crowd Health offers an extremely simplistic and workable alternative to traditional healthcare setups for a freaking fraction of typical premiums. It's essentially the decentralization of healthcare, leveraging the power of Bitcoin alongside healthcare crowdfunding to drastically uncomplicate healthcare and give back control to patients. Crowd Health negotiates bills for their members and finds them the best doctors and hospitals. Do yourself a favor. Visit joincrowdhealth.com/BCB. That's joincrowdhealth.com/BCB. And use code BLUE during sign up to receive a max discount crowdfunding request of $49 a month. Yes, $49 for the first 3 months. The Blue Collar Bitcoin podcast is brought to you by arguably the most legendary company in Bitcoin, CoinKite. They are the producers of the renowned Cold Card, the world's most trusted and secure Bitcoin signing device, built with a plethora of features fit for Bitcoin beginners all the way up to the most advanced of users. This device is a one-stop shop for your Bitcoin custody needs, and something the two of us have trusted for years. CoinKite also manufactures the Block Lock, a gorgeous e-ink digital display art piece sitting in the background of what seems to be every serious Bitcoiner on the planet. Block Lock can be programmed to scroll through key Bitcoin metrics including price, hash rate, next halving date, and much more. Boy, oh boy, will this thing look good in your living room or office. They are also the makers of many other security and fun products for all users, no matter their technical aptitude. Support our show and get a delicious discount on CoinKite products by following our affiliate link on the screen and in the notes, and using code BCB for 5% off the Cold Card. Yeah, I think reminding people of what you just said, block space, UTXO set being commodity goods, is key. Because let's draw a parallel. Like if someone sits around and says, someone's saying these ordinals and inscriptions are clogging up the meme pool and fees are way too high. What does way too high mean? Like
Nothing.
It's the equivalent to
totally
saying
arbitrary.
nickel. The price the price of nickel, the price of oil is way too high. And then trying to just change this is the seeds of worrisome regulation. Yeah, it's
the seeds of our undoing, right? We do not have a role to play in centralized control over a fee market. Look, what was written into the software was a block size limit, not a fee rate limit. No one said nothing above 100 sats per VByte.
Oh no, I made the comment on the desk after the ordinals debate. We're the point was basically like, we live and die by the free market in Bitcoin. Like, if we're going to walk away from that, like, what are we even doing here at that point? You know, like, that is literally what makes this different. I mean, obviously there's a whole bunch of other things that make Bitcoin different from the traditional finance world, but one of the primary ones is just how we're not getting bailed out. We truly live in a free market. This thing has no circuit breakers. It can go to $1,000 if nobody wants to buy it, and nobody's going to save it. So trying to, regulate ourselves with this kind of stuff is anathema to how Bitcoin is designed and should be working.
The other thing I wanted to say was just that this type of downstream, I don't even want to use the word consequence, byproduct of previous soft forks, right? It is going to make developers ask questions now about what a change is going to mean, right? Sure. You think SegWit, Taproot, nobody really thought that we'd be putting, dick pics in the witness data. But kind of here we are. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying this could be good, and that it could inject a dose of conservatism on the base layer, realizing that making soft fork upgrades could enable things in 6 years that nobody sees right now. I don't necessarily think this is a bad step currently, but it does make me a little bit cautious because most people didn't see this coming, and we don't want to make too many changes that could adjust the chemistry of this digital gold, so to speak.
It's also encouraging, I mean, on the plus side of all of this, it's also encouraging second layer stuff to start being developed in a more serious way. And we saw the ARC announcement, we see splicing on Lightning. Yep. We're seeing a whole bunch of developments on tertiary layers of this that probably wouldn't necessarily happen as quickly if there was no impetus for them, which is higher fees in the base layer. So one way or another, the market solves the problem. You just have to let the market do its work and let people implement and iterate until they've solved the problem. It's gonna work out.
Totally. I could not agree more that for every frustration I have with a diluted incentive set, on the one hand, it pushes positive incentive sets, to the other hand, which are these multi-layered scaling, sense of urgency, minor revenues, which I will mine your ordinal transactions. I will mine your BRC20 transactions. And if all you've done is separated yourself from your own sats, so be it. Right. Like that's the ball game. So I think that, while I do feel frustration around some of the bloat and some of the triviality, I guess, of the usage.
The distraction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. It's kicking a lot of dust up, in a way that I find frustrating. Number one, all the transactions are in consensus. Number two, they paid a preferential fee above the transactions that went behind it. And so therefore, it's our job to build the most exciting and compelling businesses within the Bitcoin ecosystem, such that the monetization event remains the dominant process for Bitcoin, right? I believe that Bitcoin is is a good in the midst of monetizing. And so what does that mean? It means that other monetary premia across other asset classes is inferior to the monetary premium that Bitcoin will command over time. And so it will suck the air out of those rooms, and it will bring the oxygen into the Bitcoin room. And it's really important because those other inferior monetary goods, and whether that's stock, bond, real estate, etc., those inferior goods offer individuals inferior trade-offs. And so Bitcoin offers superior trade-off sets around a monetization event. And that is what is exciting to me, first and foremost. And then if we get a bunch of other ancillary benefits that this software technology ends up being incredibly useful for, all the better. But for me, I'm a what's the most important thing person, and I try to pick one or two or three most important things and really aggressively focus on those. And so the monetization events surrounding Bitcoin over its 14-year history is that most important thing. And so, that's where I choose to spend my time, and that's why we mine.
And truthfully, Harry, if wizards are ultimately threatening and usurping monetary transactions, then Bitcoin isn't monetizing the way that we're suggesting it is. I think there's a connection there of the thesis, the bull case for Bitcoin is somewhat broken if there's no organic fee market for monetary transactions over ordinals and inscriptions. Basically, it's a roundabout way of me saying the market will work itself out if Bitcoin is as valuable for the application of value transfer as we suggest it is.
And I think people struggle with the short-termism of the debate a little bit because they don't have a clear view on how much transaction settlement happens all around the world every single year. $56 trillion settled in just international trade.
It's crazy.
It's an enormous, enormous amount of settlement. And all of that is happening cross-jurisdictionally, right? And so therefore, the need for settlement finality and assurance is disproportionately high, right? Now think about everybody who pays to escrow in title when they transact on real estate. And now think about all of the clearing houses that sit on the other side of security settlement and trading, right? These are massive, massive, massive value movers that do not have a trust minimized settlement layer. And so we're frying a really big fish with this Bitcoin thing. And it's important not to forget that and not to get caught up in kind of the short-term kind of hysterics of the moment, because we're going after the biggest market in the world, the market for money. It's half of every single transaction. And the size of those markets, as we observe them today, are enormous. And if we're able to introduce a superior monetary technology to the world, we expect those markets to grow enormously and for prosperity to follow.
Absolutely. One of the things that has surprised me, and I think, Dan, you'd agree, through this bear market is just how quickly hash rate has risen, especially in the last 6 months. I want to hear, what are your thoughts? Like, what's going on here? What are the conspiracy theories? What's going on behind the scenes at these mining companies, which you're a part of that industry. You probably have a better pulse on this than we do. Who is putting on all this hash rate? Where is it coming from? And I mean, besides ordinals becoming such a huge free market and like producing some serious profits for people in the last, 3 or 4 months, what's the impetus for this? What are your thoughts on that?
I have a few structural thoughts around this, and let's break this down into sort of 3 categories, which are the hardware manufacturers, the mining operators, and then the overall sort of energy regime. The first is that there's just a lot of machines getting produced by Bitmain and MicroBT, right? They're just let's just look at the reality, right? They command 80, 90, 95, % of the hardware market as it stands. And they've produced a ton of hash, and they've done so across high efficiency machines, right? Everything is somewhere between 20 and 35, joules per terahash at this point that's coming off the factory line from them. And that's all still extremely profitable, even with Bitcoin coming off and even with hash rate going up. So, that's number one, is that they've demonstrated that they are skilled, capable manufacturers at scale. Number two is that I think we've seen an emergence of maturity in the mining operator space, right? All those big, today are the sort of the big American pubco miners, those were all future orders in 2020 and 2021. Those are all delivered orders in 2022, and they're largely installed orders in 2023. And so we've seen them, have they delivered on every prediction? No. But you now have multiple operators within the US all delivering north of 10 exahash. And that's really impressive. And that's a big driver, here for sure. And then the third, and we can get into some of the stuff that's happening overseas. I'm less familiar with it, but there's certainly, there's certainly a case to be made that hash rate coming online, maybe, China returning to this market, maybe other jurisdictions that are not able to monetize their energy as effectively. That's pure speculation from my seat. But look, the proof, the proof is in the difficulty adjustment. And so we've seen this hash come online. It's real, better believe it. And it's incredibly impressive to see this much computing infrastructure get stood up over this kind of short period of time. But the last piece is just the energy side. I think we're seeing, miners get more sophisticated around demand response, around load shedding, around peak avoidance. And so, even if I saw, a couple of years ago, I always saw the stat, the US has a great average cost of electricity at, 6, 7, 8 cents a kilowatt hour. And, that's blended across a number of jurisdictions, blended across a lot of intermittent pricing across the day. And so what miners have done, I always think of, miners are basically the liquid in an egg crate, where we're always looking for that absolute deepest trough point in the topology. And so miners have spent the last 2-3 years finding their way to those lowest cost points, even in the face of a macro environment that's driven electricity higher. There's still strong margins to be had across mid-gen machines in the 40 to 60 joules per terahash range, and significant margins in the 20 to 40 joules per terahash range.
Start9 operating system is a full-fledged, cutting-edge Linux operating system. Its functionality and adaptability make it an excellent choice for the users who value simplicity, efficiency, and privacy. Running a Bitcoin node? Start9 is your go-to solution. Setting up a node has never been so easy. With a Start9 server, backups are more than just an afterthought. At the push of a button, create encrypted backups, ensuring your data stays safe and sound, out of the reach of big tech companies. Start9's commitment to security goes even further. StartOS is encrypted for all LAN communications. This ensures your passwords and assets are always protected. The StartOS marketplace of apps includes everything from Lightning to secure messaging apps to secure password management. If you care to be sovereign in the digital age, running a StartOS server is a must. And the best part? You can download and set up StartOS on any machine, or you can purchase a plug-and-play Start9 server directly from Start9. Choose Start9 for a secure, streamlined, and flexible computing experience. When Dan and I are at the firehouse and we have finally delivered the orange pill to a new plebe, we recommend Swan for their first Bitcoin purchase, always. Swan has the user interface absolutely nailed. We have seen people go from no-coiners to Bitcoiners in under a minute. It's just that easy. The problem with sending friends and family to other exchanges is exposing them to all kinds of BS. You will never see Swan encourage your friends or family to buy Dogecoin. Instead, Swan educates. Swan produces some of the best educational content in the space. That is a big freaking deal. The difference between somebody who buys on a whim and sells for a loss and those that hold for the long term is simply an education gap. We have been using Swan to dollar cost average into Bitcoin every single day since 2020. If you want a family member to turn into a Bitcoiner, there is no better place to go than Swan. For daily DCA, IRA, or education, Swan is the place to go. You can try Swan Premium on us for free. This includes exclusive Swan content, market insights, and other discounts. Click on our link in the show notes and use password BlueCollarBitcoin.
Are you surprised by how high it is? Just to back up a second, like, are you surprised by it just continuing to go up and to the right? And has GRIID have you had to do anything different than maybe you would have expected a year ago with strategy or implementation because it's still humming this high with price neutral?
Look, I mean, Bitcoin will always surprise you, is my, base case. So, it's really impressive to see it get kind of this escalated. I think, it's a testament to the creativity of all the operators, all over the world, whether that's a home miner, whether that's, a nat gas or flared gas, operator, whether it's a behind the meter industrial scale in front of the meter, what it says to me is that the opportunities to monetize electricity are still just getting kind of the surface scratched. And that there are creative and aggressive and impressive entrepreneurs who are recognizing that opportunity and sprinting at that opportunity. So that's, is it surprising? Yeah, it's really high. Difficulty has gone up a ton. But when you think about the use case for Bitcoin, all of the ways that being able to generate Bitcoin with no counterparty, that's a hugely valuable activity, I think, all over the world for different reasons. And so I think that, for that reason, I think hash rate, number go up, for sure. So, from the GRIID perspective, we're still in the middle of a public market process. So I'm a little constrained on what I can say, but, our cultural values around operational excellence, delivering value to shareholders and stakeholders, those kinds of approaches are always top of mind. We always are staying aggressive and open-minded. And so, we're excited. We're excited to fight the fight in this market and in every market.
My next question just centers on the United States and mining. I think when you were on here last time, you elaborated some on this being an amazing place to lay down roots as a miner and someone hashing. I'm assuming you still feel that way. Have you softened on that at all? Do you have any regulatory public perception concerns? Is anything tipping over on that end, or are you just as optimistic as you've always been?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is I'm absolutely as optimistic as I've always been. I think, generating hash rate in the US of A is the right thing to be able to do. I think we've got the court system and the property rights to be able to do it. We've got the natural resources and electric infrastructure to be able to do it. We've got the skilled labor, whether it's electricians or plumbers in an immersion environment. We've got, some of the most incredible, skilled trade labor of anywhere in the world, and being able to put, those skill sets to use in the context of supporting Bitcoin is something that I think is incredibly exciting, to have happen here. So, from all of those standpoints, I think that we should be leading the charge around the generation of hash rate, for decades to come. Now, there are some pretty big, caveats that we should cover, which are the sort of energy FUD conversation is one that I think needs to be, described accurately and from a data-driven perspective and put to bed in short order. There's zero argument on a relative basis that Bitcoin harms environments. And I think there's an absolute argument on a gross basis, as well, that Bitcoin is a huge net positive to every community, that gets to have, mining infrastructure installed. We had I've used this anecdote before, but it's worth repeating, which is that, when inflation was topping out in the mid 9%, we had a meeting with one of the utility executives that we work with. And he basically said, look, when inflation does, I'm left with a couple of options. Number one is I can raise prices on households. Number two is I can lower the quality of service. Number three is I can raise debt for the county, which is taxes. And then number four is I can find a customer like you.
Yeah.
And so when you think about it from that context, and then following that on with the natural disaster at Christmas this past year, we gave back over 30 megawatts of power to the communities that we operate in because they were going through rolling blackouts because of outages during that storm. And so those are tens of thousands of households that would be subject to rolling blackouts on Christmas Eve without their friendly neighborhood Bitcoin miner. And so from an economic perspective, it matters. From an engineering and a grid reliability perspective, it matters. And so these are the stories that I think we're going to do a better job telling in the next 24 months than we did in the last 24 months.
For sure.
And then, the folks who continue to oppose, are going to look like the folks, it wasn't legal to use a credit card on the internet till like 1993 or 4 or something, right? The internet had been around for 10 years and everyone said, no credit cards. So think of all of the value, and the good that came from just being able to freely and openly do commerce on the internet via credit card. And now think about the value that's going to come from being able to freely and openly do commerce and purchase electricity that'll come from Bitcoin.
Yeah, this is all back to basically the narrative war. We've got, the mainstream media constantly berates Bitcoin for just
existing.
The very, very empty-headed idea that just expending energy is bad for the environment, instead of the nuanced case which you just brought there over the last 5 to 10 minutes, which is very difficult for people to wrap their head around because they're not really thinking second, third order effects here. They're just very simply thinking about energy expenditure means something had to get burned and something, is polluting the environment. And it's a very difficult, nuanced narrative to bring to somebody who maybe is predisposed to not want to like Bitcoin anyway, because they've heard so many other negative things in the media about it. And this just adds another nail to their coffin in their mental narrative of what this thing is.
Totally.
And a person that has no clue how energy works, not even
which is a massive amount of people, honestly.
Most people. I mean, I didn't really have any clue how energy utilities and energy infrastructure is built out until sort of deep diving on it. The other thing about this, and what gives me solace and optimism long term, is that being anti-Bitcoin mining it already is and will increasingly be just anti-profits and anti-renewables, because it just works. There's no other way to put it other than it just works. I'm reading Jason Mayer's A Progressive's Case for Bitcoin right now. He actually does a stellar job. In the first, I think it's around 80 pages of this book, he talks a lot about energy. One of the quotes I tweeted out last night was, "Without Bitcoin, it's difficult or impossible to imagine building out renewable infrastructure in a profitable way." And as this free market incentive continues to become more and more contagious and infiltrate further, that's just going to become increasingly obvious on the free market that you either do this and remain competitive or don't do this and fade off into oblivion, because it just works. And turning it down is simply turning away profits for a lot of these energy producers.
Totally. And this is why, I think that what we're in the midst of seeing is that there are going to be businesses that are sitting on a big pile of accumulated resources, and let's just use a fuzzy variable for what resources means. It might be brand, it might be reputation, it might be currency, it might be patents, who knows? And what Bitcoin is doing is it's quietly forcing these companies to either adopt and integrate it over time or spend down those resources fighting it.
Yeah.
And so the war chest of the companies that bring Bitcoin into the fold are going to just be bigger and more impressive than the companies that fight it, I think. And so, it's just this subtle shift of like, are you willing to do business on the merits, or are you willing to do business on the face of the ideology? And ideology is fleeting and balance sheets are forever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's physics versus, imaginary things. Like the physics wins every single time.
Yeah.
To get real, what does or could worry you from a regulatory or political standpoint?
Yeah.
There has to be some things that maybe scare you, especially running a business in this sphere. What would be some of those things?
Totally. I mean, I think look, there is no doubt about it that political incentives do not map to business incentives one-to-one. And so there may be a dislocation between the political incentive structure and the business incentive structure that becomes so great that, what I perceive or we might perceive to be irrational behavior emerges, right? We saw it in New York, right? Like they don't want, they basically built a piece of legislation, directly to target Greenwich and the power plant that they operate in Dresden, New York. CoinDesk actually did a phenomenal job covering the community perspective on that. Don't agree with lots of things that Coinbase does or reports on, but this was actually a great piece. And so, it's, that's something where, the constituents of that town don't have any problem with it and they see the benefit. So, I think that when political incentives and business incentives separate, you end up with bad behavior. And so, that scares me for sure. And just the overall kind of macro environment, right? We've seen significant inflation. We've seen significantly aggressive government spending. We've seen, all sorts of negative economic outcomes that come from, the way that they hike the rates. Most recently blew up, whatever, three of the top five or four of the top five, I forget, largest banking collapses, in American history. So, let's not pretend that we're all standing on firm ground, and let's be thoughtful about, the context within which we operate. And, the other piece that I always try to stay, aware of and thoughtful about is just that Bitcoin's not that big yet, right? We're still small, right? And man, it might have been a Steve Jobs quote or something from his biography, but it's just this idea, this thought that ideas are fragile, and that, when ideas, are brought into the world, they are vulnerable for a period of time, and they are still fragile before they become, dominant, world beating, future driving thoughts. And while, that is absolutely what I believe Bitcoin to be, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that the future that the three of us have talked about, and the prosperity that could become available to us through that future, is still a fragile idea. And if we do not function as good stewards of it, we will lose it. It is not promised.
Yeah.
And so, that's not an answer for what regulation scares me, or what kind of, negative outcomes scare me, but it's just, the thought that, we as Bitcoiners become complacent, or take for granted the future that we hope for, because let's be real, it's still hope. That complacency scares me.
Yeah. The Bitcoin community sometimes does walk around suggesting it's got a way bigger dick than it currently does. Don't get me wrong, guys, it's a beautiful cock. It's just not 11 inches yet. And we need to be a little bit careful. And the other thing, Harry, is like, we have to think about public perception. Just because you spend 12 hours a week on Bitcoin Twitter doesn't mean that everybody else does. And people still have this whole crypto ecosystem lumped together. It was a giant circus in which the big tent caught on fire and killed everybody inside. That is the perception from the outside. We know that Bitcoin's different. In many ways, the exact opposite, but we have to give some grace and credence to public perception that says there was an enormous amount of financial and collateral and yada yada recklessness in this space. And so, I heard Nick Carter, he was on with Peter talking about Operation Choke Point 2.0. I have to give that more thought, but it makes sense that people are confused, some of them worried, and policymakers are wanting some regulatory clarity surrounding this asset class, because for better or worse, it's not completely decoupled from a perception basis. And that's some real understandable FUD that we're going to have to continue to work through here in the short and medium term, in my view.
I want to just comment about this. I mean, the idea of Bitcoin as a technology and as what we know it as today is a new thing. But this idea, this philosophy that it engenders goes back thousands of years. I mean, the ancient Greeks would have arguably been like the first people to come up with these, political ideas that we espouse today, followed by the Roman Senate, the Magna Carta, the Constitution. These are deeply ingrained in our culture, especially in the West.
Yeah.
These ideas about freedom and what we espouse and what Bitcoin fundamentally espouses, which is freedom of speech, freedom of, to be able to send value around without anyone being an intermediary.
It's self-enforcing.
You could arguably say that stuff goes
right.
back.
Like this is what
Exactly.
it's doing. It's a self-enforced property right without reliance on a third party, whether it's a court venue or whether it's a police force or a standing army. Right. It's property rights that are self-referentially enforced.
Absolutely. You put it perfectly. What I'm saying, though, is as people come to the recognition that that is truly what Bitcoin is fundamentally, I think it gains it gains, momentum as more and more people come to that recognition. And yeah, as a new idea, as a technology, I think it could be fragile in some ways, but as an idea that has been fundamentally Western for thousands of years, I think it's more robust than we might give it credit for.
Let me push back though, because I don't think that Bitcoin, the technology, or any of the ideas that you described are the fragile part. I think the fragile part is that the entire global economy can reorient around a new settlement layer. That's fragile.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying there, because depending on how that transition goes, any transition throughout history of a new system has been muddy, very muddy. I mean, we saw it World War II, World War I, that whole 20-year period between the First World War, the Second World War, the Great Depression, nightmare scenario that luckily none of us had to live through, and hopefully we don't have to live through anything like that. You're right. The organization, the difference there is, how do we get from here to there in a way that doesn't turn the world into turmoil?
Let me ask there's an even more basic version of the question. Can we get there? Do enough people believe that we can get from A to B? Is the dollar going to enter into multipolarity? Is China manufacturing not going to win? The future of hard goods of hard goods. These are really big and foundational ideas that not a lot of people believe yet.
Yeah.
Right, and that.
But I think multipolarity is the way this thing is likely to go, or at least for a long period of time. I don't think China, the CCP, is going to be like, yeah, we're running on Bitcoin. That there's no way that happens in my view.
The answer is we're gonna find out. But when I think about what can I do to deliver global value, the best thing that I know how to do is to be able to tell people that it's real and it's possible, and I believe it will happen. And so when I start a Bitcoin, spiel, which I do less of than I used to, is just like describing how it works and that it works. Right.
And wait, when you rev up that machine, Harry, are you like us, where you're like, you have a go, no go decision? Am I going to take the brakes off and roll this Mack truck straight downhill, or am I have two gears. It's either I go full frontal on you, or I stay completely clothed and quiet. I can't go in the middle anymore.
What we call that, or what I call that, is am I going to ruin the party? So my fork in the road is on the left side, we're going to all keep having a good time. On the right side, I'm going to ruin the party.
Shit's going to get real.
Fuck the party up too. And the funny thing is, if I was at the party with you, you would fuck the party up for me. Hey, we're having a good time. I'm 3 cocktails in. I'm enjoying the scenery. You just fuck the party up, because we're going to talk about Bitcoin for an hour and 45 minutes. People are going to get pissed.
Yep. And for me, it doesn't have, friends I know well and I'm close with, they're all either reasonably orange, but they are not orange pilled at all, or I bullied them into buying Bitcoin and self-custodying it and making fun of me. Those are sort of my close friend cohorts. Then there's like I'm somewhere, I know a third of the people, or maybe 20% of the people, and someone comes over and says, "Oh, what do you do?" And I have two. There are two answers, and it's the fork in the road, right? One is I develop large scale data centers. That's we're not doing this. The other is I'm a professional Bitcoin miner, and that's the ruin the party answer.
Yeah, there's no going back from that one. There's no just the tip on that. That's full penetration right there.
Yeah. And that's no pulling out either. You can't pull out once you start that one.
Hey, but you know what? These conversations matter, dudes, because you said this with Peter. I wrote it down, and it's basically like throwing meat to a couple hungry wolves, the two of us as firemen. You said, the day I know we've won is when the labor force, the people that work, dictate to their employers that they want to be paid in sats. This is why narratives matter. This is why education matters. This is why you should push yourself to politely and responsibly and humbly share how good this technology is. And I do emphasize the word humbly. I think one of the things I'm grateful for about our perspective, we were certainly not experts, but we were very into, as a hobby, macroeconomics before we found Bitcoin. We understand that there are a lot of broken things in the system, Harry, but the 21st century monetary landscape is not totally dysfunctional. It's still fairly well lubricated. It works decently well if you compare it to other options Homo sapien has had through the millennia.
Totally.
And so to just tell people that the sky is completely falling and this is your savior is not the place to start. Yes, when you understand Bitcoin and the potential scaling solutions and financial rails that are being and could be created, you get very optimistic and you see room for improvement. But I think it's a turnoff. Like, I'm going on a getaway, a weekend getaway with my college buddies. It's been 10 plus years. A number of them work in finance. For me as a fireman to bust through the fucking Airbnb and tell all these dudes that trade equities for a living or trade bonds for a living that the whole system's fucked and they need to go pile into Bitcoin, that's going to get nowhere. And I find that gets nowhere with most people, because today's monetary infrastructure, although it's got tons of flaws that we've talked about for 111 episodes on this show, it still works reasonably well in certain contexts. And people need more than that.
And the economy works in spite of those flaws, right? It's important to be able to kind of share this piece of it. You know, in Miami, I got to spend some time with Jeff Booth, who is just he's kinder than he is smart, and that's saying a lot. And he, you know, we were talking about it, and we're, you know, the incredible thing about sort of the American experiment is that we have just transformational technology that's delivered boundless quality of life improvements. And we're starting, and, you know, this is the doomer, you know, view a little bit, but just, we're starting to see kind of the coming off the peaks of some of those from a life expectancy, you know, obesity, you know, some of these biomarkers for society, some of them are starting to turn, which is very scary. But quality of life, you know, would you rather be John Rockefeller in 1870 or yourself today? Right? He's the richest man.
Dan the fireman in 2023.
Totally.
Easily. Yeah.
Totally.
For sure.
Right? You don't have to, you know, ride a horse to get to the doctor's office to amputate a pinky, right? You call an Uber and it's fixed up with stitches in like 19 minutes. So, you know,
No, you call an ambulance is what you do in our area, Harry. And our naps get interrupted.
Dan, I don't think Dan hasn't heard this story. We had a lady call 911 because she got attacked by her cat the other day. It's like you hear this and you're like, this is nonsense. This cat leapt on her head. It tore her scalp up. She fell down the stairs and she was in such horror that this cat was going to come back. And there was like a fucking mountain lion in her house. This cat was like, we shoved it in the basement. This thing was like a feral, like, mountain lion that really fucked her up. Like, she had scratches all over. It's like, I don't know what she did with this cat, but it was pissed. So as an aside here, that was wild. Never seen a cat attack quite like that.
I don't think we see some bad dog injuries though. Some of these pets, man, I have seen some dog injuries. I'm not even going to share on this. They're so bad. Sorry, you just got it's like twice an episode, mid sentence we pop in with a firehouse story.
I have a 9.5 pound, so I'm not at risk. I am the dominant male in my household.
I don't even remember what we were saying before. Maybe this is our.
What were we saying?
Sorry, we
totally derailed it.
Just the quality of the quality of life that technological deflation has delivered is massive, right? So all of the time saving, the ability to get into a carbon fiber tube and get launched across the country in 4 hours, like ridiculous, right? That's 3.5 days in a car. That's like 6 months in horse. Right. So, you know, so just
dying of dysentery on the way there. So, drinking some bad water. That's it. Game over. Get the leeches. Get the leeches.
Your nuts cut off by a tribe in fucking Ohio.
Scalped.
So these are the things that modern life has offered us, and we've gotten all of that deflationary value, technological improvement on the back of a flawed monetary regime. And so to say that, life is bad, fix the money, fix the world, my answer is life is good and could be better, fix the money, fix the world.
Yeah, I think that's a healthy way to look at it for sure.
Amen.
And I think a lot of people, they get very excited when they read something like Dalio's Changing World Order. Amazing book. Like, he goes through 4 or 5 different monetary regime changes over the last 500 years. But the important thing to keep in mind is that this stuff happens at a pretty long scale. Like, just to sit here and say the dollar is going to die, it's very likely it's going to take decades for that to happen. And we're hoping it does, because the transition can be much smoother if things don't happen in a quick manner. That's just the way you want it to happen. So yes, things definitely can be better. They could be much worse, however. I mean, we've avoided nuclear war for the last 70 years. We haven't had any really crazy shit happen. So we're in pretty damn good shape, and we're doing better.
Yeah.
But we can be doing even
much better.
I think a lot of Bitcoiners think they have low time preference, but then Bitcoin steps in front of your face and challenges that one step further. And I've had this conversation with my wife where I've explained, I think there's a chance that the thesis I'm describing plays out beyond our lifetime long term. Like, in terms of this really clicking. And I mean, that I think we're going to see dramatic adoption while I'm on this earth, but this thing could play out, as you alluded to, Josh, over a very long period of time that may beg some questions to some Bitcoiners. Are you strapped in for that long of a ride? Is this for you? Because it could take that long, and there could be valleys that last a lot longer than you anticipate. That is a scenario I've been thinking through more recently, playing through a real choke point, kind of draconian regulatory environment in the US, where this thing kind of ducks for cover and becomes obscure for a decade. Are you really prepared for that? I'm not saying that's likely. I'm just saying that's theoretically possible on what is a very unknown future trajectory.
Just to give you a point of context, because I totally agree with that. The Great Depression was less than 100 years ago, right? The bread lines.
Yeah.
Yep. And World War II, 80 years ago. It's not that long. It's just not that long ago.
It's really not.
And
it's the time. I mean, it's so easy for people to forget. I mean, clearly we weren't there. But those firsthand stories, that generation that experienced it, changed them significantly, which changed their kids significantly. And we do these like tides of history thing where every 4th generation, we've completely forgotten the horrible shit that went on in the past, and then we tend to repeat it. That's the kind of thing that scares when you think about that deeply. What was
I think about my life in these time spans. Like, I'm in my mid-30s. You go back, 2 times, I'm storming the beaches of Normandy, getting my left arm blown off. Like, that's not that long ago. I have not been alive that long. And that's how I think through these timelines. And I also think through just the brevity of the time I have. You double your life. You're in one place. You triple your life that you've had so far, at least at my age. You're gone. And I think that really helps you zone in on what matters, what's important, and soaking in every day, every month, every year. Because, man, is it going quick.
It's got the ruminations of a midlife crisis right there.
Going really so
beginning,
quick,
dude. Midlife crisis begin.
I'm going to need a Corvette or something.
Yeah, dude. Get a yellow Corvette.
I mean, that's the thing
Tan
about
leather
Bitcoin.
interior.
It makes you so frugal and so obsessed with cash flow when you start digesting this Bitcoin thing. And back to the labor force, Harry, we're seeing saving habits at our firehouse that I never dreamed possible out of some dudes. For the first time, getting the implications of this whole Bitcoin thing, all of a sudden cash flow is king, and having that extra car or that insane vacation or that totally unnecessary house with the 4th or 5th bedroom you never use goes out the window, and you become hungry.
Totally. Just try to end the day with one you started.
Yep, absolutely. But enjoy it while you're here, because
you're not taking it with you.
We're not going to be here forever. Exactly.
Yeah.
Handoff, Harry, you end this how you want, to you, GRIID, whatever you want our audience to know before we sunset this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're whatever, 6-7 years. I'm 6-7 years into a Bitcoin journey, and I'm still having so much fun. Right? Definitely have to swat away some of the you said it, but mouth breathers on the internet. Those experiences continue, but I couldn't have dreamed I'd make as good friends and build such exciting and fun relationships, business relationships, just all of it. I feel so fortunate to have gotten to be born in a time where a life like this is possible. I take the happy warrior role very seriously, which is to arrive with significant aggression, but also compassion. That's a combination that I try to cultivate, when I'm able, get down to Nashville to Bitcoin Park. We have a full podcast studio, so we'd love to do a show out of the studio.
We need to, Josh.
Yeah, we do.
We could do like 10 shows down there, I'm sure.
In one day. We'll just
McCormick one day, just go full blown McCormick on this thing and just record like 16 episodes in 2 days.
Pick a day when we've got a summit. You can have a bunch of guests in person.
Heck yeah.
Loving working on GRIID, loving sort of the mission of sitting in between better money and better power. I think that, money and electricity are tools of human flourishing, and delivering those in higher quality at lower cost, and lower friction, to Americans and globally is, it's just the highest calling for me. And getting to do that is such fun.
It's so cool. We had Hersman on from Gridless recently, and
those guys are awesome.
I mean, we've been thumbing this over for a long time, but the energy inclusive byproducts of Bitcoin could be just as significant as the monetary inclusion.
Yeah.
Byproducts. I mean, it's that potentially that big of a deal.
Totally. Couldn't agree more. I think the number of skilled entrepreneurs and skilled leaders and skilled parents and just people all over the world who, they're just facing a natural resource constraint from being able to realize some of that capability, makes me, only more excited to be part of a global economy that benefits from the fruits of their labor.
Amen. You have a great rest of your day. Stay inside, dude. Keep those lungs healthy.
I'm not going after this. This is dark.
You might actually need to wear a mask out there as much as you probably don't want to after the last couple of years.
It's so funny that I was on a call earlier, and that's exactly what we were joking about. I was like, you know what? It's time to get some of those masks.
Time to mask off.
Wait. Call Fauci real quick, dude. Hey, Fauci, should I wear a mask for this, or is this not necessary? I don't want to waste them.
Sudock was going to go full blown cuck, but here he goes. He's putting a mask on here.
I'm legitimately going to wear a mask later in this horrible forest.
Wait, can we see? If feel free to say no if you got something you don't want the audience to see. But for YouTubers, can you show them out your window right now? Can we see this?
Yeah. Dude, it looks like apocalypse now out there.
Yeah, give me a sec.
Harry Sudock on the move.
Yeah,
by the way, I did pronounce it right, correct? It's Sudock.
And other people have gotten it wrong. It's all
holy crap!
It looks like you're in Beijing right now.
I've never seen anything like this. Like, this is, across the street is hazy.
It's nuts.
Wow.
Yeah, it's wild, guys.
Yeah, dude, mask up.
N95.
You don't want that Canadian smoke. It's even worse than any other.
Yeah, it comes with a side of true don't.
Square wheels.
Sorry. Oops.
Hey guys, I'm so sorry about the fires that we had to make burning, but it was cold in northern Canada. Hey, so maybe we could give you some of our byproduct down the south.
We got to be careful, man. Like, half of our sponsors are Canadian, and I think like a third of our listeners.
Hey, NVK. Hey, bud. I'm coming for you. Hey. So could the Canucks win the cup next year? Hey.
Sorry, Rodolfo.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's
sorry, Steve Barber. Love you, boys.
We sent a tweet recently. We went something like this. We said, if you're a grown man, never call another grown man bud. And it was a joke from Fire. Just don't call guys bud when they're your. And then a bunch of Canadians chimed in. They're like, That's not the case up here. We call everybody bud. We're like,
Everybody's
sorry.
a bud in Canada.
It's a bud bifurcation that happens when you cross the border.
Yeah.
Oh, the
All right,
one
Harry, we'll let you go,
actual
man.
shit on here today.
Sounds good, guys. I appreciate it.
Take care.
See ya.